Iran has denied holding direct negotiations with the United States, saying it has no intention of doing so. Instead, it has laid out its own conditions for ending the war in response to a U.S. ceasefire proposal. Meanwhile, the White House insisted that efforts to end the war with Iran are gaining momentum and said President Trump will travel to Beijing for a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in mid-May, after the trip was delayed because of the ongoing conflict. At the Blue House, President Daejeon addressed concerns over oil supply with his aides this morning. They're expected to have discussed setting a maximum price for oil in the second round of announcements scheduled for tomorrow, after the country imposed a fuel price cap to shield the economy from an energy shock. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. Iran says it's reviewing a U.S. proposal to end the war, but denies any direct negotiations with Washington. Tehran has instead outlined its own conditions for a ceasefire, including sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
Iran says it has no intention of holding direct talks with the United States, but is reviewing an American proposal to end the war. According to Iranian state media on Wednesday, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stressed that exchanges of messages through mediators do not mean negotiations with Washington.
No negotiations have happened until now, but over the past few days our American counterparts have begun sending messages through other countries that are our friends. If there are messages through others, to which we respond with our own position and demands, that is not called conversation, nor negotiation, or anything.
Earlier in the day, media reports from Iran said Tehran would reject a U.S. ceasefire offer and that the country had instead presented its own conditions for ending the conflict. A senior political security official cited by state broadcaster Press TV said Iran's five-point counterproposal includes a demand for sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical oil shipping route. Other conditions reportedly include a complete halt to what Iran calls aggression and assassinations, guarantees the war will not resume, clearly defined war reparations, and an end to fighting across all fronts involving regional resistance groups. However, the demand over the Strait of Hormuz could be a major sticking point. U.S. President Donald Trump earlier suggested the waterway could be jointly controlled by the U.S. and Iran's leadership, a proposal likely to face resistance. Meanwhile, the Associated Press reported that Iran has received a 15-point peace plan from Trump. The U.S. president said negotiations are underway, but Tehran has denied that any direct talks are taking place. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Although Iran has denied engaging in any negotiations with the U.S., Washington continues to insist that efforts to end the war with Iran are gaining momentum. The White House also says a long-awaited meeting between President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping will take place in Beijing in May, signaling that the conflict could end within weeks. Our Moon Yeon has the details.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters on Wednesday local time that negotiations are ongoing and productive, even though Tehran has yet to accept a U.S.-backed ceasefire framework. She declined to reveal specifics of the proposal or the talks, stressing their sensitivity, but acknowledged that some publicly reported details are inaccurate.
What I will tell you is these talks are ongoing. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details that have been exchanged between the United States and Iran at this time.
Despite Iran's public denials that negotiations are taking place, the White House insists that back-channel discussions are continuing. At the same time, Leavitt underscored that U.S. President Donald Trump is prepared to escalate if Iran refuses to compromise, warning that Tehran must recognize what she described as its weakened position after weeks of conflict.
President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell. Iran should not miscalculate again.
According to the U.S. Central Command, the campaign has already hit more than 10,000 targets, dealing significant blows to Iran's military capabilities and sharply reducing its ability to carry out missile and naval attacks. On Capitol Hill, questions remain about the scope of presidential authority, after Leavitt said formal congressional approval is not currently required for ongoing operations, adding that the president wants to maintain options as the situation evolves. Uncertainty also surrounds Iran's leadership, with the White House saying it is too soon to say whether any emerging figures would be acceptable negotiating partners. Looking ahead, the administration is signaling that the conflict could be relatively short-lived. Leavitt reiterated a projected timeline of roughly 4 to 6 weeks, suggesting an end before Trump's rescheduled summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping in mid-May. The White House says that trip, delayed due to the conflict, is now back on the calendar, even as efforts to secure a ceasefire continue. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, President Lee Jae-myung presided over an emergency economic meeting this morning to mitigate the impact of the Middle East war on the local economy. Before the closed-door meeting, he once again called for thorough preparations, including an extra budget and monitoring of fuel price collusion. He also asked the public to join efforts to save electricity, citing potential financial losses at a concerning level as power bills remain frozen. The previous day, the Blue House set up an emergency economic situation room, and the Prime Minister's office created a pan-governmental response team. And also to address the economic impact of the Middle East conflict, South Korea's government announced at a meeting with the ruling Democratic Party this morning that it will submit a supplementary budget to the National Assembly on March 31st. Officials said the plan is aimed at easing high fuel costs, stabilizing livelihoods, and supporting industries hit by rising prices. The proposal includes backing a fuel price cap, expanding aid for vulnerable groups, and investing in supply chains and energy transition. The government added that the budget will be funded without issuing additional debt, while urging swift parliamentary approval to minimize further economic damage. South Korea has launched its domestically produced supersonic fighter jet. President Lee Jae-myung called the launch of KF-21 a springboard toward the country's vision to become the world's top 4 global defense powerhouses. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
It was a decade in the making, and President Lee Jae-myung hailed the first delivery of a KF-21 as a symbol of South Korea's aspiration for self-reliant defense over more than half a century.
KF-21의 양산을 통해 마침내 우리 대한민국은 땅과 바다에 이어 하늘에서까지 우리 기술과 의지로 평화를 지키는 무기를 보유하게 됨으로써 자주 국방의 위용을 떨치게 됐습니다.
He was speaking at a ceremony on Wednesday at the Korea Aerospace Industries headquarters in the southern city of Sacheon to celebrate the launch of South Korea's new supersonic fighter jet, produced using its own technology. The event was attended by related officials, foreign ambassadors, and private firms.
KF-21의 성공을 대한민국 방위산업 4대 강국 도약을 향한 든든한 발판으로 삼을 것입니다.
The commander-in-chief highlighted the jet's outstanding performance and low maintenance costs. He vowed to spare no effort and investment in nurturing the nation's defense industry and share know-how with its partners.
나아가 협력국의 세계 최고의 무기 체계뿐만 아니라 우리가 가진 기술과 개발 과정의 경험을 함께 공유하여 K-방산의 경쟁력을 더욱 높여갈 것입니다.
South Korea reportedly plans to sign a contract with Indonesia to export 16 KF-21 fighter jets. Since the blueprint was unveiled in 2001, the country officially launched the development project in 2015 and successfully completed its final flight test in January. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
A senior U.S. diplomat says Washington is conducting an extensive review of a bilateral agreement linked to South Korea's push to acquire nuclear-powered submarines. Speaking at a House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing on Wednesday, Under-Secretary of State for Arms Control and International Security, Thomas DiNanno, said the effort follows a joint fact sheet issued in November that confirmed U.S. approval for its whole submarine project and outlined close cooperation, including possible nuclear fuel sourcing. He added that the Pentagon is handling infrastructure issues while the State Department reviews fuel-related matters, while also reaffirming the U.S. commitment to extended deterrence for South Korea. Findings for the month of January show a subtle yet tangible shift in South Korea's demographic portrait, with both the numbers of newborns and marriages on the rise. Our Kim Do-yeon has the latest numbers.
South Korea's demographic landscape saw a bright spot at the start of the year, with births and marriages both posting double-digit growth. According to the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Wednesday, 26,916 babies were born in January 2026. That is an 11.7% jump from a year earlier and the highest volume for any January in 7 years. Following 9 consecutive years of decline since 2016, January births have now recorded double-digit growth for 2 straight years. The total fertility rate, the average number of children a woman is expected to have, near the 1.0 mark, rising by 0.10 on year to 0.99. This increase was primarily driven by women in their 30s. Notably, the proportion of firstborns rose to 63.5%, while the shares of second and third children shrank. However, officials urge caution before calling this a permanent reversal.
January is typically a month with an exceptionally high number of births. Over the past decade, January has accounted for roughly 9.7% of the annual total. So, while the numbers came out strong with a large on-year increase, whether this trend will continue is another matter.
Marriages, a leading indicator for future births, also surged. The country saw 22,640 registered marriages in January, up 12.4% on year. This marks the largest volume for the month since 2018 and the third highest growth rate for a January since 1997. Meanwhile, deaths fell 17.6% to 32,454. The agency attributed this sharp drop to a base effect from last year when harsh weather conditions caused a spike in fatalities. Consequently, the nation's natural population decline slowed to 5,539. However, major cities like Seoul and Incheon bucked the national trend, recording natural population growth. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Daejeon, often called South Korea's city of bread, is drawing crowds with a unique taxi service for bakery lovers. The so-called bread taxi takes visitors on a guided tour of the city's most famous bakeries. Our Cho Young-eun was there.
The city of Daejeon has turned its downtown bakeries into major tourist attractions, drawing visitors into a unique culinary experience. At the center of this trend is the so-called bread taxi, a unique ride that guides passengers through the city.
The bread taxi launched last November and gained popularity among bread enthusiasts as it tours famous bakeries around Daejeon City.
이 택시 운행은 어떻게 시작하시게 된 건가요?
I created this service for people who love Daejeon's bread. I hope it becomes a bucket list experience for all bread lovers in Korea, and, if I may be ambitious, for people all around the world.
The driver greets passengers at the station with a big smile, accompanied by bread-themed dolls. Passengers receive a welcome kit that includes a guidebook to Daejeon's bakeries, along with tasting plates, utensils, and wet wipes. Visitors are pleasantly surprised by the menu-style guide and foldable tables similar to those on airplanes. The taxi's first stop is a bakery that's famous for its egg tarts. The driver tracks each bakery's opening hours and baking schedules, ensuring passengers can enjoy freshly made pastries without waiting long lines or missing them altogether.
이 집에서 에그 타르트 다음으로 맛있는 게 얘예요. 피자. 피자빵. 이건 나중에 집에 가서 에어프라이어로 데워 먹어도 돼요.
A stop at one of the city's largest bakeries fills visitors with excitement as they show their passion for discovering new flavors. The driver explains the best menu items at each bakery, along with tips on how to best enjoy and store different types of bread and pastries. He even recommends unique pairings such as ramyeon and kimchi rice bowls.
네, 조합을 너무 좋아해요.
Passengers savor each combination at their own pace, fully enjoying the experience as they eagerly try the driver's top recommendations.
Once I got on, the driver was so kind, it felt almost like being with family, so I could relax, enjoy the bread, and have a great time.
As a city renowned for its rich bakery culture, Daejeon is attracting more and more visitors with these unique tourism experiences. 조영은, Arirang News, Daejeon.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces a Tuesday deadline to pass a $225 billion budget or face a snap election he is widely expected to lose. 4 weeks into the war with Iran, polls show the conflict hasn't helped him politically. A March 19th survey puts his Likud party at just 28 seats, down from 34, leaving his coalition 10 short of a governing majority. The war is also costing Israel's economy roughly $1.6 billion every week, with schools shut and workplaces only partially open. If the budget fails to pass by the March 31st deadline, Israeli law would trigger an election within 90 days, one that Netanyahu's own party fears he cannot win. A Los Angeles jury has delivered a verdict against tech giants Meta and Google, finding them negligent for designing social media platforms that addicted and harmed a child. The jury on Wednesday ordered Meta to pay $4.2 million and Google $1.8 million to a 20-year-old after finding that Instagram and YouTube deliberately used features like infinite scroll to get her hooked on the platforms from a young age, placing profit over the safety of children. The case now sets the terms for thousands of similar lawsuits waiting in California courts. Both companies plan to appeal. Separately, a New Mexico jury on Tuesday found Meta violated state law by misleading users and enabling child sexual exploitation across its platforms. The United Nations on Wednesday passed a floor vote declaring transatlantic slavery the, quote, gravest crime against humanity. Ghana proposed a resolution which was passed in a 123-3 vote at the General Assembly, with the U.S., Israel, and Argentina voting against it. The UK and over 50 other countries abstained. The non-binding resolution calls for formal apologies, the return of stolen artifacts, and financial compensation for the forced enslavement of at least 12.5 million Africans across more than 4 centuries. First Lady Melania Trump walked a humanoid robot named Figure 03 down the White House hallway on Wednesday, introducing it as the first American-made humanoid guest in White House history. Speaking at the Fostering the Future Together summit, Melania Trump called on governments and tech companies to deploy AI directly in classrooms. That same day, President Trump appointed the CEOs of Meta, Oracle, and NVIDIA to a new White House AI Policy Council, declaring that artificial intelligence is America's defining battleground against China. Daejeon, Arirang News.
It's going to be another day that really feels like spring. Temperatures will rise well above average, with Seoul reaching around 20 degrees Celsius this afternoon, going up about 7 degrees higher than usual and staying that way through Sunday. But please beware of large temperature differences. In terms of air quality, the level will stay in the bad range in most regions. And when the level goes too high, make sure to wear a face mask. Meanwhile, continuous mild and dry conditions are raising the wildfire risk. A nationwide fire alert is currently at the caution level, so please be careful with anything that could start a fire. And this afternoon, most regions will see highs in the 20s. Seoul getting up to 20 degrees, Daegu topping out at 23 degrees Celsius under sunny skies nationwide. Now, warm and sunny skies stay with us through Saturday, then rain is expected early next Monday.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.